Welcome back to Black Book Stacks. I am your host, Toshonda Sanders, and this is a video about all the books that I read in February. Well, not all of them, some of them, most of them, I think. And so I wanted to start off with Freshwater. I'm going to say their name wrong. Akwaeke Emezi. Anyway, this is it. I appreciated this book. I also have Pet, which is also by them. And this book was shortlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize, and I completely understand. It actually reminded me of Chigozie Obioma's An Orchestra of Minorities. I interviewed him for Kirkus maybe a year ago, maybe less than that. And the whole premise there, as in here, is about a story that's narrated not by the protagonist, but by the Chi, which is this sort of spiritual guardian intermediary between the kind of spirit world and the earthly realm, sort of for those of you who are into kind of new age woo-woo spiritual talk, it's the sort of, you know, the layer between the 3D and the 5D. So I thought that it was actually really a poetic book. In Freshwater, there is a Chi. There are actually brother sisters. There is a Chi, and it seems like there are actually a couple of Chi. So there's like a plural spirit that is sort of venomous. This is, I don't know if you can tell that this is like a two-headed snake, right? So it's a really wonderful way, I think, of using an allegory for the two-spirited person or a non-binary person, for example. But it's not explicit, it's very nuanced. And essentially, we hear the story of the main character, the Ada, who is making her way in the world, and basically mostly guided by this Chi. And the Chi is both protector and also kind of counselor. And Jesus, surprisingly, kind of makes an appearance as this sort of in a kind of disdainful way, actually, where there's reference to this Yeshua person who is kind of sanctimonious and self-righteous and doesn't really respond in an intimate way in the same way that the Chi do and the other kind of spiritual forces in the Ada's life do. I just thought it was really beautifully written. It was really unique. I wrote on Goodreads that I felt like I was underwater the whole time I was reading it, which is true. I just felt really submerged in this otherworldly etherealness of the writing. The reason I'm not talking about the plot is not even because I don't want to spoil it for you, because of course I don't, but it's also because I'm not really sure how I would sum up the plot. And so if you're a person who is really like kind of plot driven, also really kind of genre fiction, this is definitely not really, I think, your book. This is definitely a literary fiction experience. And I say experience with like underlined, bolded, is definitely an experience. And I think a good one, really crafty, unique, and beautiful. So, thumbs up for that. And Pet, I'm sure will make it on my nightstand at some point when it's not so crowded there, because right now it's look a little crazy. So, I will get to Pet though, and we will we will talk about that too, because I'm curious to see what their sophomore effort is looking like. Okay, let us talk about A Phoenix First Must Burn, edited by Patrice Caldwell, coming out very soon here in March. Okay, I will just say, let me start with what I didn't like, and there isn't a lot, so that'll be brief. It begins with a story by A-Marie, When Life Hands You a Lemon Fruit Bomb, and I really like A-Marie's music. I am a big fan of her music. I don't know, I could not understand this story. It did not feel like it should have been first. I think because if I were going on the Nancy Pearl school of like reading and also reviewing, well, I guess you can't really do this if you're reviewing, so I'll take that back. Nancy Pearl is a famous librarian, First Amendment like protector. Shout out to Nancy Pearl. Not that she'll ever see this, but it's fine, and neither will A-Marie. I'm so sure, 100% sure. Anyway, so Nancy Pearl is a famous librarian. I believe she was based in Seattle, right around when the Patriot Act was a thing. I'm sure it's still a thing, but when it first became knowledge to other people that it was a thing, she was one of the staunchest kind of spokespeople against it on behalf of librarians everywhere. So I love her. She's a superhero. I think there's even like a Nancy Pearl toy. Anyway, so Nancy Pearl says, if I'm reading a book, if I don't like it after 50 pages, I do not finish. DNF. Like, we're not doing this. And so I tried to abide by that, even though it's really difficult. Anyway, so this story is the first 20 pages or so, 15-ish pages of this beautiful collection. So I could see where it was trying to go. Like I understood that it was meant to be futuristic, and but it just didn't. For me, it just did not work. I was not able to. I kept trying to figure out, what is the story about? What is the story about? How are these things connected? And I just wasn't able to do it. That said, I loved Elizabeth Acevedo's story, which is Gilded. It's set in 1521. It's incredible. It has the same, I think, momentum and propulsion forward that a lot of Elizabeth Acevedo's work does. So it's really like super easy to follow. I really liked E.B. Du Bois' story here, as well as a hagiography of Starlight, which is by Samaya Dodd. I might be butchering her name, but my bad. I also like Justina Ireland's book, Melly, her story. Danielle Clayton's Hearts Turn to Ash was really amazing, and kind of like, in the same vein as like the Belle series, but like definitely really unique. I think in terms of talking about a powerful kind of love story or like crush story that turns out a little bit, and turns out more surprising than you might expect it to. Patrice's vampire-esque influenced story is really sweet. It is very meet cute-ish, which I think, by the way, E.B. Du Bois' story is called Kiss the Sun. So I like the meet cute aspect of a lot of these stories. I shout out to Karen Strong for The Witch's Skin. And I like that love and crushes and relationships with others were kind of a theme that made their way through the stories. And at the same time, this is sold as Beyonce's Lemonade meets Octavia Butler in 16 tales by best-selling and award-winning authors that explore the Black experience through fantasy, science fiction, and magic. Well, I feel like maybe if the word love was added, I would be like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. Like, love is a clear theme that resonates, and so there's a lot of overlap. And what I said in my review on Goodreads was also that, like, in some of the reviews of A People's History of the United States or A People's Future of the United States, I think something like that, but it was the collection of short stories edited by Victor LaValle and a gentleman whose name I'm forgetting. What people said was, there's a little bit of repetition here. And so I think it's fine if Black girls have a collection where they repeat themes. But I think that the thematic matching of Black girl magic or resistance and hope, it also, in this case, also includes a lot of love. And actually, I would say it includes more love than resistance. And I think that I think that can be encompassed in Black girl magic. But anyway, I'd be curious to hear what you think. I think it's a beautiful book. I think it's a really great collection and anthology to add to not that many anthologies like it. It's incredibly, kind of one of a kind in that way. And so I highly recommend that you pick it up if you like short stories. I feel like I might have already talked about Deacon King Kong. But anyway, I read it in February. I really loved it. I think that, a lot of the reviews will probably talk about, I scanned Junot Diaz's review of it in the New York Times. I've seen some other reviews other than my own. And I would say that the main thing that I still keep thinking about when I think about this book has to do with the humor in it, the kind of old school way that communities took care of one another and stayed kind of loyal to one another, and kind of using that as a jumping off point to talk about this one sort of broken deacon, sport coat, and him sort of mourning his wife, and all the other characters kind of in this great tale. So I think people who are looking for something like The Good Lord Bird probably will be disappointed, and I think Junot Diaz's point was that for a novel set in the 60s, there's not a lot of 60s there, and I would definitely agree with that. I hadn't even really thought about it. I think that there is some description of the 1970s or the late 60s, early 70s-esque landscape. But I was thinking more about the intimacy between the characters, particularly the male characters of different ethnicities and races that I hadn't even really thought about. So, what are you gonna do? Anyway, all right. The Stars and the Blackness Between Them. I have been thinking and thinking and thinking about this book because I didn't know what I wanted to, I didn't know if I had anything positive to say about it, so I didn't necessarily know if I should say anything at all, which is, I think, a common book nerd thing. I don't know. Maybe it's not that common. Anyway, I love this cover so much. It's one of my favorite covers of all time of a book. Just look at the beauty of that, the richness. They are actually Mabel and Audra are the names of the two main characters, and this is them, I think, laying down in what they call Black Eden, which is Mabel's backyard. It's where her father essentially tends to gardens, or I think it's at least meant to evoke that. Okay, so we have two girls that are from two very kind of different worlds. One is from Trinidad, and the other is based in Minnesota, and we get both of their narratives essentially in alternating chapters. And then Audra, who is from Trinidad, is sent away because she's caught. People think that she's really in the church, but she's caught with another girl, like making out on the beach, having sort of an alternative version of church, unbeknownst to her mother. And so then her mother sends her to go live with her dad, who also happens to live in Minnesota, which is where she meets Mabel. So I'm going to try not to ruin the plot by talking about the book. What I really loved is that there's such beauty and sweetness and tenderness and all of the anxiety I think that queer Black girls feel when they are rejected, when they fear rejection from their families. I think all of that is just really well done and really well told. There are places where it begins maybe around the late middle of the novel to veer away from attention to Mabel and Audra, and it goes into like a couple of different subplots. So not just one, because I think one or two is fine, but there were like two or three, and it's not that they're unbelievable, it's just that they're not, it feels like they don't quite earn the space that they begin to get. And they make sense from a plot point, but I don't know, there was just something that once the like kind of main sort of plot situation that takes us to the end began to form kind of parallel to Maple and Audra's relationship unfolding, it was a little bit harder for me to imagine it being real. So I don't know if you've read it. I'd be curious to hear what you think, but I mean, I think it's a beautiful premise. I'm glad that the book is in the world. And it includes like astrology, which I'm totally into, and yeah, some really lovely, there's some Whitney Houston references, which I really love, which is ironic because I went to a dinner where they played the Whitney Houston version of the Star Spangled Banner, and I was like, oh, Whitney is like everywhere still, which always makes me happy. So if you've read it, I'd be curious to hear what you think. Last but never least, I finally got around to reading my friend Jamia Wilson's book, Young, Gifted, and Black. Obviously, I was reading because it was Black History Month. I think this came out maybe 2 years ago-ish. But it's just a beautiful book. I mean, I'm obsessed with Ava DuVernay. So here she is in her glory, right next to Bessie Coleman. Like, oh my gosh. But also, people I've never heard of, like Kathy Freeman. That's cool. Right next to Chimamanda Adichie. And anyway, I just loved seeing this this beautiful kind of colorful combination of people. Madam C.J. Walker, who Octavia Spencer is going to play in a Netflix biopic. Psyched, cannot wait. And I don't think I even knew who Yannick Noah was. Maybe I heard his name once or twice. Same thing for Maurice Ashley. Anyway, so this was a nice, kind of way to educate myself about Black history and learn something new and get in touch with my inner child a little bit with all the colors and the great layout. And so if you are looking for something for young readers to share with Black folks or other children, I highly recommend that one. All right, that's what I have for my books from February. I will follow up soon with books from March. And until then, let me know what you're reading, how you've been. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much for your likes, shares, and subscribes. And see you again very soon.